Three things make the Empire great: faith, steel, and gunpowder. Magnus the Pious, Emperor of the Empire of Man. Hello everyone, this is Caledorn, and in this episode of Warhammer Fantasy lore, we will learn about the rise of Sigmar and the formation of the Empire of Man. Of the human nations of the Old World, the most important by far is that of the Empire of Man, more often called simply the Empire. It was forged by the warrior king and ascended deity Sigmar Heldenhammer from the primitive human tribes of barbarians who inhabited what became the lands of the Southern Empire more than 2,500 years ago. The people of the Empire are, unlike the older races of the world, not beholden by the limits of tradition to the same extent, and continue to progress culturally, technologically, and magically, while the older races are in decline. Having yet to succumb to any threat, it is the faith, the sense of righteousness, and the unconquerable spirit of the citizens of the realm which gives the Empire its strength, as well as the ruthless efficiency of its military and religious orders. There are currently 10 provincial states in the Empire, each ruled by a feudal lord known as an elector count, who owes his or her power to the unifying figurehead and ultimate authority of the Emperor. The Empire is not, as one might believe, a single centralized nation, but instead a confederation of individual feudal states, united only by the common tongue of Reichspiel, a shared faith in Sigmar, and a mutual imperial culture. Also, these provincial states correspond roughly to the ancient tribal territories brought together by Sigmar when he united the tribes of man beneath one crown to defeat the greenskins of the Old World. The southern imperial states are, from the capital state itself, Reichland, Talabekland, Sturland, Averland, and Wissenland. The northern imperial states are Middenland, Nordland, Hochland, Ostland, and Ostermark. Solland, in the very south, was once an imperial state with its own elector count. Solland was, however, sacked and destroyed by a great warg led by Gorbad Ironclaw, who slew its ruling elector count. The lands have since been integrated into the state of Wissenland in the true lore, but in the Total War Warhammer 2 setting, which isn't entirely true to the canon of the Warhammer Fantasy lore, this state has been revived under the control of Balthasar Gelt as an elector count. Sylvania in the southeast also used to be an imperial state. However, with the rise of the vampire counts, the von Carstein family seceded from the Empire and formed their own nation of undead here, preying and feasting on the blood of their very own human subject. The wasteland in the west used to be the imperial state of Vesterland, after being conquered by an emperor long dead, but has since seceded through paying a hefty bribe to the Empire. At the heart of Vesterland lies the now independent city-state of Marienburg, the largest trading hub of the Old World at the mouth of the River Rhine. Great danger there was in the east, in the lands of our enemies, and the clans of the manlings fled west. Ignorant of the arts of steel and warcraft, they had no weapons that could stand before the goblins and their allies. They gave us gold, cattle, and salt, and we let them pass, protected by our shields. Dwarven historical records. The history of the Empire of Man stretches back for more than 2,500 years, but much has been forgotten or lost. War, fire, flood, and even conspiracy has destroyed or hidden many of the historical records. And while present-day Imperial scholars dig and research to discover the hidden truths of the past, the gaps are many, and their conclusions are often simply wrong or skewed to match their preconceptions and political or religious ideology. Also, certain truths are simply too dark and terrifying to reveal to the common people, as revealing these truths would spread panic and doubt throughout an otherwise docile population. No one knows when humanity first entered the Old World, or from whence they came, but the most ancient records of the dwarves record the steady movement of humans over the world's edge mountains over a period of several centuries, sometimes fleeing more powerful tribes of men, other times fleeing the rampaging hordes of the greenskins. The earliest record of these migrations is mentioned in the chronicles of Nuln Shieldbreaker, an ancient king of Karazakarak, the capital of the dwarves. The golden leaf of this folio, stamped with the most ancient Khazalid runes of the dwarves that no outsider is allowed to see, record a pastoral human tribe who worshipped the earth itself in the form of the Earth Mother, a religion now remembered as the Druidic Old Faith. Timid around the highly martial dwarves and persecuted by the other tribes in their home territory, this tribe vanished into the forests of the central Old World. Dwarf scholars who have lectured on early history estimates that this occurred around -1500 IC, some 1500 years before the coronation of Sigmar. Around -1000 IC, Dwarven Khazalid inscription on the walls of Blackfire Pass mark the passing of a massive confederation of tribal peoples from the future lands of the Border Princes and the steppes beyond the World's Edge Mountains. Dwarven historical records from this time also speak of the migration of the humans. Unlike the previous peaceful agricultural tribes that had preceded this massive migration, these newcomers were aggressive, and the bearers of a culture based on raiding each other for cattle and women. While they stood no chance against the iron weapons of the greenskin tribes, their bronze blades and chariots were more than a match for the obsidian and flint weapons wielded by the existing tribes who had now settled in the Old World. Within a century of their arrival, the ancestors of the Teutogen, the Unberagen, and the other founding imperial tribes had displaced the older peoples and taken the best lands of the central Old World for themselves. For centuries afterwards, the tribes alternated between trading and making war on each other, uniting only when they had to face external threats. While the dwarves provided the tribes with some protection, the Dwarven Empire was already in decline at this point in history, and thus the Greenskins became ever bolder in their attempts to find ways into the lands of the Old World. They made hideouts deep within the forests or among the rugged hills and raided the human tribes mercilessly. But even worse than the Greenskin raiders, the humans were beset by chaos warriors looking for glory for their dark gods and mutants looking for food and slaughter. These growing threats led to the development of the first true human fortified towns and villages in the lands of the central Old World that would eventually become the foundation of the Empire. In the west, the Unberagens founded a walled village at the confluence of the River Reich and River Talabek, naming it Reichdorf. In the south, Chilean merchants from the once ruined elven city of Miragliano built a fortified trading post on the ruins of an abandoned high elf settlement that quickly became a rallying point for the local tribes in times of trouble. This settlement grew over time and eventually became known as the city of Nuln. In the north, the Teutogens continued to search for a safe place for their people to settle, until a vision from their patron god Ulrich, the lord of winter and wolves, led them to a flat-topped mountain that stood like a fortified island among the surrounding dense forest lands. There they built the great settlement of Middenheim. Aye, together! I cannot do this alone. I need my sword brothers with me. Swear with me, my friends. Swear that everything we do from this day forth will be in service of this vision of a united empire of man. Sigmar Heldenhammer, Emperor of the Empire of Man. The origins of Sigmar Heldenhammer, founder of the greatest nation of the old world and ascendant to godhood, are unsurprisingly shrouded in myth and legends. The Sigmarite cult itself, of course, insists that all the stories are true and accepted as religious dogma, even those stories that outright contradict each other. Dwarven and Imperial scholars agree, though, that Sigmar was most likely born to a family belonging to the clans of the Amberogens, and that he was most likely born in Reichdorf. His birth came at a dangerous time, though, as the tensions between the tribes were very high, and the greenskin threat was more dangerous than ever before. Sigmarite cult legends speak of a great twin-tailed comet that blazed across the heavens on the night of Sigmar's birth, seeing it as a sign from the gods, proclaiming their blessing upon the infant boy. 15 years old, Sigmar and his warband crushed an orc warband led by the black orc Vagras Headstomper, who had ambushed a massive dwarven trading convoy somewhere south of Reichdorf. During the battle, it is said that one of the dwarf captives threw a golden hammer to Sigmar. While Sigmar was recovering from the battle, he learned that his dwarf captive benefactor was none other than the dwarven High King Kurgan Ironbeard himself. The grateful High King rewarded Sigmar with a warhammer as thanks for saving his life. The warhammer was known as the famous Gal Maraz, meaning skull splitter in the dwarven tongue. Sigmar and Kurgan Ironbeard soon became fast friends after this event, solidifying a long-lasting friendship between the two races. Sigmar had a vision that mankind would only survive if it stood united against the many and growing dangers threatening the old world. Through a combination of guile, diplomacy, bribery and war, Sigmar brought various human tribes into his Amberogen-led confederation, with himself as the acknowledged leader. One by one, the leaders of the various tribes pledged their support to Sigmar and his Amberogen. Yet, some of the tribes still refused to acknowledge Sigmar's vision. The Bretonni tribe had no desire to become part of the Confederation and migrated to the west, eventually settling in the region that would become Bretonia. The Teutogen tribe, on the other hand, chose to terrorize their neighboring tribes through raids and refused to give up the old ways and join with Sigmar. The defiance of the Teutogen tribe was a major challenge to Sigmar's dream of a united human nation, and he realized that he had to deal with the Teutogens and their chieftain Arthur, who had declared that he would not bow to any man, nor allow his people to give up their ancient heritage. Sigmar thus set out to challenge Arthur, and climbed to the top of the mighty mountain Fauschlag by hand, where the city of Middenheim lay. There he defeated Arthur in combat inside his very own throne room. As a result, the elite Teutogen warriors known as the Knights of the White Wolf, who were dedicated to the god Ulrich, pledged their allegiance to Sigmar as his personal guard, and once they were on board, the rest of the Teutogen tribe also pledged their allegiance to Sigmar, as they saw him as blessed by their god, Ulrich. Having united all the human tribes in the central old world, in -1 IC, Sigmar then summoned all the tribes to a great area which would one day be known as the Mootlands. Sigmar recounted all the atrocities committed against humanity by the Greenskins. He talked about the danger looming in the mountains, of the huge orc horde the dwarves were struggling to hold back. Sigmar called upon all the tribes of man to unite, and to make their common stand together with the dwarves, calling it the crucible of a new nation. As recorded in the Book of Origins, Sigmar's final shout of "to war" was answered with a cheer so loud that the dwarves heard it as far away as Blackfire Pass. History records that Sigmar's army arrived just in the nick of time, just as the Greenskins finally breached the wall High King Kurgan had built across Blackfire Pass. Leading the charge, Sigmar fell upon the Greenskins as if he were the god Ulrich himself. The force of the human assault stopped the greenskin advance, and then gradually began to push it back. When the dwarves saw this, they charged out from their forts and towers and fell upon the greenskins' flanks, instilling fear into the greenskins, who began to break rank and flee. Warlord Earlgluck Bloodfang, leader of the greenskin army, desperately rallied his forces and attempted a counterattack. Charging into the human and dwarf armies, the warlord found himself face to face with Sigmar and his Knights of the White Wolf. An epic battle ensued as Sigmar and the orc warlord entered single combat, while their troops were fighting around them on all sides. Warhammer clashed with Cleaver as the two struggled for dominance, and after nearly an hour of battle, Sigmar finally defeated the orc warlord, killing him with a mighty double blow, first breaking the hand that held the cleaver, and then smashing Bloodfang's skull on the return stroke. Seeing their leader fall, the spirit of the greenskin army finally broke, and the army broke and ran in utter panic, while the armies of the humans and dwarves fell upon their most hated foes in their backs. It is said that there has never been a greater concentration of crows in all the world than that which gathered to feast on the stinking and unburied corpses of the greenskins who fell that day in the Battle of the Blackfire Pass. It would be more than 1,000 years until the greenskins were able to muster a similar force to the one who fell there. After the Battle of Blackfire Pass, the humans returned to their lands, but not to their old ways. In their great victory, the human tribes recognized that Sigmar's vision was indeed true, and they knew that he was the one to lead them. Thus, in Reichdorf, 1 year after the Battle of Blackfire Pass, the high priest of the cult of Ulrich placed a crown of gold and ivory, a gift from the dwarves, upon the head of Sigmar, and proclaimed him the Emperor of Man. Before the newly crowned emperor, the tribal chiefs knelt and swore brotherhood to each other and fealty to the emperor and the newly formed Empire of Man. This moment marks the start of the Imperial calendar, that occurred in the year 1 IC. In his shrewdness, though, Sigmar knew that the old ways still held strong in his people, and he also recognized that the lands of the newly formed empire were simply too large to govern as a centralized realm. Thus, he proclaimed the 12 tribal chiefs into counts of the empire, declaring that each count would be sovereign in his lands, subject only to the laws and edicts the emperor made for the empire as a whole. These 12 tribal lands became the original 12 great provinces of the empire, and a dwarven runesmith known as Alaric the Mad forged 12 great magical rune blades called the Rune Fangs for each of the tribal chieftains. The years of Sigmar's reign were a time of peace and great internal growth for the empire. Sigmar decreed the building of 2 great roads, the first from Altdorf, formerly known as Reichdorf, now the capital of the empire, to Middenheim, and the second from Altdorf to Nuln, along the banks of the river Reich, this second road to join the old dwarf road in Averland. Peace and good weather brought regular harvests, and eventually a booming population. Great cities, still standing, like Talabheim and Averheim, were founded during this time. Middenheim grew wealthy as the religious capital of the empire, as Ulrich was Sigmar's favoured deity. In the south, Nuln prospered as trade along the rivers to and from the dwarf holes of the World's Edge Mountains expanded after the coming of peace. But all things must come to an end, and 50 years after ascending the throne, Sigmar announced his abdication. "My work here is done. The empire is prosperous and united, and in your good hands it will continue to be so. But I have work I must finish, a task left undone, and I must return Galmaraz to its maker." With those words, the first emperor placed his crown on a table, picked up a rucksack, shouldered Galmaraz, and walked out of the imperial palace and Altdorf to meet an unknown fate, much to the grief and sorrow of his peers and subjects. Sigmar travelled eastwards, and as he emerged from the forests onto the eastward plains, he found himself flanked on either side by a massive grey-headed wolf on one side and a towering boar with tusks of black iron on the other side. As Sigmar made his way up the eastern hills, the Great Lord's bestial allies came faithfully at his heels, the wolf with its strength and courage, and the boar with its wit and tenacity. Sigmar disappeared into the east, pausing once to look upon his great works and take pride in all that he had accomplished. He knew that the land and the unity he had created was greater than any one man, any one dynasty. It belonged to the people it had been made for and by, and it would be guarded by their strength, existing eternally in their minds and souls. They were all his heirs who would take up his mantle and rule the land in his absence. Raising his mighty warhammer in honor of the indomitable spirit of humanity, and in praise of Ulrich, who had in his benevolence granted him victory, Sigmar offered one final goodbye to the people he so loved. He had now reached the climax of Ulrich's wolf path. His reward now stood before him, earned through strength, bloodshed, and unsurpassed heroism. He would now take his place in the everlasting company of the gods themselves. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Warhammer Fantasy Lore. In the next episode we will continue to learn about the Empire and how the 12 counts became the Elector counts of the Empire, seeing as Sigmar had no heir to take the throne. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you all then.